people who haven't found a question relevant to them, what are your stories? Story 1. I don't know who remembers, but after 9/11 there was a celebrity fundraiser, and if you donated more than $100 you got to talk to a random celebrity. We could barely afford it at the time, but we donated the $100 anyway, and they put Whoopi Goldberg on the line. She thanked us and said a few things. We mostly just smiled, and at the end, she was wrapping it up and I said, "You are awesome as Center Square," and she laughed. One of my friends to this day periodically reminds me that I once made Whoopi Goldberg laugh. Story 2. I was at the zoo one time when I was younger, and I stopped by the gorilla enclosure. The gorillas, being gorillas, were ambling all over the place and hooting like crazy. But for some odd reason, when they saw my face, they were enchanted. I had 4 to 5 gorillas just staring at me and lounging around. They didn't seem territorial or anything. I ended up playing a game of peekaboo with one of them and unfortunately never got to see any of the other enclosures. It's a fond memory, that's for sure. Story 3. Wife was on her first Zoom meeting last March in the kitchen. I asked if I could be off-screen cooking breakfast quietly, and she said yes, as long as I'm quiet and not distracting. I wound up burning what I was cooking, causing lots of smoke. Then when I was trying my best to get the situation under control, my robe that I was wearing laid on the burner, electric stove, and started smoking. So basically my wife told me to not be distracting, and I wound up lighting myself on fire. To her credit, she maintained poise and completely ignored my situation. We still laugh about it a year later. Story 4. My great-grandmother lived in a nursing home for the last years of her life. She was about 95, with minimal eyesight and hearing when this happened. My great-grandmother told my mother she was afraid of that lady in black. "What woman in black?" my mother would ask. "The one that is standing at my bed every night. I think she is finally coming to get me." Naturally, my mother dismissed this as a figment of her granny's imagination. One evening, when my mother was visiting, great-grandma told her, "I think I'm going to die tonight. Can you stay? I don't want to be alone when the lady in black comes for me." So my mother stayed, sleeping uncomfortably in an old armchair. Suddenly, she awoke to some noise she could not immediately pinpoint, but she saw a figure in a long, black gown standing at the far end of the bed. My mother's scream must have woken the whole nursing home, but it especially scared the lady in black. She turned tail, left the room and ran into one of the nurses, who came running to investigate my mother's scream. It turned out, the lady in black was my granny's bedridden and demented neighbor. Nobody knew she could actually walk, let alone dress up in her favorite black dress and wander the nursing home at night. Apparently, she was seen by some of the other inhabitants, who, fearing they would thought to be crazy, simply never talked about the ghost that would enter their rooms at night to stand at their beds and water their plants. Story 5. My stepsister has a lot of mental and health issues. Severely autistic, and a lot of people assume she just can't function. My stepmother was horribly abusive when we were kids, and much more so to my sister because she couldn't vocalize it. There was a point right after my grandparents got custody that my sister has had enough and just walked downstairs, stared our stepmother in the eye and pissed everywhere before walking back upstairs. She knows exactly what she did, and it was the funniest thing because the stepmother had to clean it. To this day she acts like my sister was a horrible person who just didn't like her. Every time she tells the story I laugh my socks off because my sister dealt with so much crap, and that was her best screw you moment. Story 6. I was in the middle of a contract once with a guy when blood started pouring out of his ear. He ran straight out the door without a word, and I was all kinds of worried for him. I'm so glad he turned back up later that week and explained he just had surgery on that ear. I sometimes wonder how I would have felt if he never came back. I kept fearing what sort of condition could cause that sort of thing to happen out of the blue. Story 7. I was a production assistant on a stop-motion kids show. A big part of my job was going out to purchase supplies the workshop needed to build the sets and puppets, etc. Now the thing about these kind of workshops is they will use whatever works, and they often come up with unorthodox solutions as shortcuts, like the time they sent me to an adult shop at 9:30 a.m. to buy thumb handcuffs. Our cop puppet needed handcuffs and they were the perfect size. But that didn't even compare to my most amusing and embarrassing supply run ever. The animation director came up to me one afternoon saying that he needed me to go to the drugstore to buy, and I quote, "the largest tube of KY jelly you can find." In stop motion, KY is used to simulate water, especially when it has to interact with the puppets. It stays put between frames and doesn't damage the paint. Anyway, our seamstress overheard our discussion and asked me while I was at the drugstore to get every tube of wet wipes they had. It's a safe way to clean the puppets and wardrobe, and we went through a lot of them. Next, the woman in charge of making all the limbs pipes up and asks me to get 6 pairs of white nylons while I'm at it. They hold the magnets in the feet. So this was my shopping list: 1 extra large tube of KY jelly, 6 pairs of white nylons, and every tube of wet wipes in the store. The look on the cashier's face when I dumped my basket out on the counter was priceless and, for me, fairly embarrassing. Story 8. Waiting for my takeout at a Chinese restaurant when this middle-aged man stormed in complaining that he'd been waiting 30 minutes outside for them to bring him his spaghetti. The bar staff tried to explain that he might have been looking for the Italian restaurant next door, but he wasn't having any of that. Screaming commences for 5 minutes, climaxing with this brilliant line, "What the hell do you know? I have a master's degree." Shortly after that, his wife calls asking where the heck he is, and he starts blaming the staff. She starts yelling at him and he gets all sheepish, then slinks out the door to the Italian restaurant next door. Hilarious to witness, but I felt sorry for the wait staff, so I left a 40% tip. Inside joke in the family now to say is I have a master's degree when things start getting heated. Normally calms things down pretty quickly. Story 9. Pulled a stranger's dildo out of my pocket at the pub. Went to buy a new jacket at Target, tried on the one on the rack, but it was one size too small. Went back to the rack, grabbed the next size up and went straight to the counter and paid for it. Cashier throws it in the bag. I head home and throw the bag on the table. Next night, my mates turn up at my house unannounced to grab me to go to the pub. I get dressed real quick, grab the bag with the jacket and jump in the car and head off to knock the top off a couple of frothies. A few shandies later and we decide to head home. We get outside and it's definitely jacket weather. I throw the jacket on. The boys give me a hard time about how fancy it is as I put my hands in the pocket and find an object in there. No idea what it is or how it got in there, so I pull it out in front of everybody. I'm left standing there in my fancy new jacket out the front of the pub with the lads, with a stranger's dildo in my hand and no idea how it got there. Of course, nobody believed that I had no idea how that thing came to be in my possession. Almost 20 years later, and I am still curious about the series of events that lead up to somebody needing to hide their dildo in a jacket on the rack at Target, why they didn't return to get it, and if they did return, what their reaction was when they couldn't find the jacket. Story 10. My family pet growing up was named Arwen, and she was a massive Airedale Terrier. She was the light of our lives, truly the world's best dog. She would herd the chickens and let the baby chicks nestle into her fur and nap on her as she sat quietly in the sunshine, not moving lest the peeps be disturbed. But her most heroic act came when my brother Liam, about 10 at the time, was trying to move our basketball hoop and base out into the yard for the summer. He didn't notice the 2 rattlesnakes coiled up under the base, but Arwen did. She leapt in front of Liam, between him and the snakes, and both Liam and my dad, who was nearby, saw both snakes strike. Dad ran and grabbed Liam, pulled him away, pulled Arwen aside with the other hand, then sent Liam running to grab the hatchet to dispatch the snakes. We took Arwen inside and put her on her bed, and we called the vet. The vet said he would come out to put the dog down, but if she was bitten by 2 snakes, there was basically no chance she'd live. My mom said no way in heck was she putting her baby down without a fight. So she did some Googling and found out that just loading the poor dog with Benadryl can counteract snake venom, and that's just what she did. Arwen lay still, swollen and bleeding, for 3 days. But then she got up and she walked around. She lived 5 more years, dying at 17. She was the best dog. Story 11. Back in high school I worked as kennel help at a veterinarian office. One day, we ran out of sink cleaner and some various products necessary for work. He sent me to Walmart to stock us up. I loaded about 10 or 15 cans of Comet and a few jugs of Clorox in the buggy and was headed over to get something on the other side of the store. As I rounded a corner, I almost collided with another lady's buggy. She looked down and all but screamed, "Is there a sale on Comet? Oh my God!" and took off running with her buggy towards the cleaning aisle. I tried very hard to catch her and tell her it was for work, but she was absolutely determined to grab the rest of the Comet. If you were accidentally scammed by a teenager into buying a crap ton of Comet in 1984 or so, please know I tried to stop you. Story 12. I once gave the singer Meat Loaf 2 very awkward handshakes. This was obviously a few years back, when both conventions and handshakes were a thing. Meat Loaf arrived at his booth, and the first thing he did was go down his line to personally shake hands with everyone there. Unexpectedly, Meat Loaf was offering handshakes with his left hand, and me being a righty, when it came time for me to shake his hand, my brain had a meltdown of what to do. So instead of also using my left hand to shake his hand, I extended both hands and awkwardly cupped his. I knew I messed up, so I didn't commit to the awkward hand cupping, so on top of it being awkward, it was also loose, and if there's one thing that makes handshakes worse, it's when they are weirdly limp. He then went to his booth, began signing autographs, and eventually I made my way to the front. I got my autograph, and once again he offered his left hand to shake. This second handshake was slightly better than my first, in that this time I only extended one hand, my right, which I then noticed, and then finally successfully offered my left hand. He shook it, and I went on my merry way with my autograph and a new story to tell. Very nice man, was very friendly to his fans and never once brought up my inability to give a proper handshake to a left hand. Story 13. When I was a child, I thought the term bust a nut was the same as break a sweat or to heavily exert yourself. I remember one day telling my older sister I had busted a nut after cleaning the house, and the look of pure confusion and concern on her face. I didn't find out until years later what that actually meant. Story 14. My fiancée has bad luck with online and phone services. Her track record of getting nowhere when having to call about a payment or something is amazing. Before we lived together, I kind of thought she must be mean or condescending to the people on the other end of the phone. But nope, she is nice and pleasant. However, she still gets nowhere or gets someone unhelpful. This bad luck also extends to Amazon. The amount of her packages they manage to lose is astounding. Where I order just as much and have only had one lost package in the amount of time she has lost 5. And that package that got lost was a gift for her. If you've gotten this far and enjoying the content, please leave a comment of your own story. We'd love to make a video of them in the future. Story 15. One late night coming home from an evening out, my husband, a friend of ours, and myself rounded the corner to the stairs that lead to our apartment when we saw it. Sitting about halfway up on the stairs was an opossum, eating a sandwich. He was sitting on the stairs just like people do, on his bottom, with his little feet sticking out, and in his hands was an honest-to-God Subway 6-inch, still in the paper but slightly unwrapped, just like how people eat it. It was like he was a tiny person in an opossum suit. There was just something so human-like about everything he was doing. We stood there for what felt like ages watching this opossum eating and trying to figure out what to do. No way were we going to risk walking past him. We finally decided to take the long way around back to the second set of stairs, but as long as I live I'll never forget that opossum. It was such a truly surreal moment. Story 16. My father has gotten into a fistfight with a raccoon, a buck, a turkey, and goat all on separate occasions, and at this point I'm scared of the thought of him going somewhere with more dangerous animals like Alaska or Australia. A turkey bit my sibling when he was 5, and my dad somehow got it in his, admittedly drunken, mind that he needed to defend my brother's honor via fighting the turkey. The raccoon had repeatedly gotten into the chicken coop, so my dad moved the chickens in the garage and staked out the coop for the bastard. Good news, he found the raccoon and had a rifle handy. Bad news, the raccoon had rabies, and it turns out it's pretty hard to aim a rifle in a small, enclosed space while trying to dodge a raccoon trying to launch itself to your leg. I don't know where he shot it, but it wasn't going down very easily and he had to resort to punching off his hip. The goat was our senior, brain-damaged goat named Ozzy. I mentioned the brain damage because no goat with a quarter of a functioning brain cell would go from peaceful to bat crap crazy in 10 seconds and try to ram, then stomp my dad quite like Ozzy did. They both made it out okay, though my dad had multiple hoof-shaped bruises and Ozzy had to wear the pull noodles of shame on his horns among other precautions. I know we probably should have gotten rid of Ozzy at that point, but he was in his twilight years as it was and we didn't want him spending it getting shipped around or slaughtered. Story 17. So about 5 years ago I'm walking with a guy I used to hang out with. We are crossing the street in the crosswalk and he says, even if we get hit it's not our fault, and we immediately get hit by a large truck. I fly through the air, which is actually liberating for someone with a fear of heights, kept my eyes closed though. I hit the ground about 3 feet from hitting a large stone pillar that would have ended me. I stand up, check on my guy, walk to the guys who hit me and say dead serious, is your truck okay? I walked away, no injuries. The guy I hung out with had a cracked pelvic bone but turned out to be a sexual offender later on. Love telling that story. Story 18. It was in the 3rd grade and our teacher said, first 5 students that will give me their classwork will get 5, which is an A in American schools. 4 students gave their notebooks and I was with my completed work going to teacher and I saw a girl ahead of me with her work. I then threw my work to the teacher's table. Teacher accepted my work and the girl was sad. Story 19. A few weeks back, I was driving a car and there was a motorcycle some 20 feet in front of me. On it were a couple and their son. When we were taking a 90 degrees turn, it lost control and they fell, and I kid you not, as soon as I realized they were falling, my perception went into some kind of slow motion, kinda like in the Matrix bullet scene. In the split second that the bike lost control and they fell, I estimated the distance between us, how fast I was going, how much I needed to brake to stop hitting them, should I and could I swerve right just to be sure I don't hit them, and checked if there were any vehicles overtaking me, all the while the lady was falling down in some kind of slowed down video. As soon as she hit the road and I braked hard, everything went back to normal and my tire stopped a few inches from her head. There was another split second where everything went faster than normal, but that was small. Everyone was safe. Story 20. This is about the time I peed all over myself while my husband had me pinned in a very compromising position. So, we were wrestling on the bed. He pins me so that I'm basically folded in half on my back, with my bottom up in the air and my knees are by my ears. I start laughing. Then I start farting because I'm laughing. Then I start laughing even harder because I farted. I'm still pinned down, not breathing from laughing so hard, my chest is burning. I needed to stop laughing and take a breath, and right when I thought I was able to take a breath, my dog violates me by shoving his nose right where I farted from and holds it there. The audacity of this action made me laugh even harder and I pissed all over myself. Story 21. One time I had a substitute teacher who fell and hurt herself while walking me somewhere. She went to the nurse, didn't tell any of the other teachers, and disappeared forever. I'm assuming she may have been let go for not telling anyone that she couldn't teach for the remainder of the day. It's basically a fever dream memory at this point cause it happened when I was 7. I hope she's okay now. Story 22. One time I was walking across campus stoned. I'm walking by 2 kids, aged maybe 10 and 5, like 20 meters away. Not sure why they were there without an adult, but they were. The younger one looks at me and yells, "Hey, I like your shirt." So I yell, "Thank you." He responds, "And your backpack is okay." I don't respond. The older one yells, "He's working on his compliments." We both continue on our ways. A few hundred meters away, a dude about my age walks up with a tray of cookies and says, "Hey, you want a cookie?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love a cookie." "What's the cookie for?" He say, "No reason, just handing out cookies." "You want 2?" I say, "Yeah, I'd love 2 cookies." "Thanks a lot, buddy." So I take 2 cookies and they were awesome. It was a pretty good walk. Story 23. During a hike at Yellowstone Park, I took a massive crap a few meters away from a bison. My friend from grad school had previously been a skydiving instructor in Colorado and had jumped more than 600 times. One of these times, he had his wallet in his chute and it fell out. Fell to earth somewhere and he figured, this sucks but oh well. Absolutely no chance of finding it. Separately, a man in rural Colorado was found without life. Turns out in their remote cabin where he lived with his daughter, he had been physically abusing her and she finally had enough and managed to take his life. The police searched the house and all of his property and found my friend's wallet in the trunk of his car. Police thought to themselves, stupid idiot suspect left his wallet in this dude's trunk, down easiest arrest ever. My friend had the super believable alibi of couldn't have been me officer, actually that wallet fell out of my pants while I was skydiving. My friend was never arrested but he was questioned and had to have his story corroborated. From what I remember of him telling me the aftermath, the cops knew early on that it was the daughter so she might have confessed. The abuse and self-defense details didn't come out until later though. When the cops cleared my friend, they told him the father had taken all of his cash. They have no idea why he kept the wallet. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Thread Talk for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out. Have a dope day and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!